The Has Been Show with me, Martin Beanz Warde, the podcast that travels in the back of a van. Hello and welcome to The Has Been Show. On this episode we're going to get a little bit gloomy. We're going to talk about, I suppose for myself anyway, I'm going to talk about the decimation of the entertainment and I suppose events industry. We've got a few guests coming on, talking about their perspective of being either a market owner. We're talking to some events and festival producers and promoters. We're also going to talk to someone who works with an organisation trying to bring about some change, I suppose, and trying to talk to the government. I think the EPIC they're called, but they're more of a lobby group, I think, on behalf of people that work in the live entertainment sector. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But for me, I suppose, I can't really talk about this show without giving up a little bit of how I feel about it all, for what it's worth. Like, I started comedy back in 2005 with Des Bishop's Join the Hood for RTE. And from there, I did some shows with Des and we drifted apart, I suppose. And I went a separate way and he went on to great fame and, he got all the TV deals and all that kind of crack. It's great, brilliant, more power to you. I went a different direction and I went to the UK and I ran a bar there for a while. Then as a recession hit, I came back and I decided that I needed to have a third level education because I needed a backup plan. And that's what I did. So then in 2015, I graduated from NUIG. In 2016, I decided to get back into comedy, and Galway Pride approached me and asked me to do a comedy show. So it was the first time that I was ever actually going to run a large-scale event to a large audience of 200 people, and it was fantastic. It was brilliant, and it gave me the kind of, I suppose, the ambition to do more. And from there, I, along with a few other comedians and a few friends of mine, we started to run events across the country. It was great, brilliant crack, and it got me used to being on stage again. Now, from there, I decided that, I needed to maybe get out and do my own show and kind of tell my own story as a traveller comedian. And I started off with the Go Me Fiend tour, which I talk about a little bit later in this episode. And with the Go Me Fiend tour, it was totally ad-libbed and improvised. There was no pre-scripted or rehearsed comedy jokes or stories. It was literally live and raw comedy based on the interactions of the unwitting audience. It was great fun. It was brilliant. But I use it as a way to test the water in regards to me getting venues for my actual tour. And I learned last year, in 2019, when the Go Me Fiend tour was out, that it was difficult for me to get venues. I thought that because I was a comedian, that would be less fear, but that wasn't to be the case. A lot of venues either refused me outright, a lot of them lied and said that they were double booked, a lot of them didn't get back to me at all. But we move on, and that's what we need to do in life, is to move on and to try and overcome adversity like that. And as a traveller, I'm quite used to adversity and I'm quite used to seeing it manifest and things like that. But I learned that I had to overcome that, and I need to do that by taking a negative and turning it into a positive. So I called on the arts community last year to help me out, to reach out and to help me gain access to theatres and venues across the country. I went in with the notion thinking that they weren't going to be very helpful because I had my own preconceived notions about the type of people that were involved in the arts industry. I was totally wrong, and I was pleasantly surprised. The amount of support I got since then is fantastic. It was an absolutely phenomenal experience in my life to realise that there were people out there that were just good people and wanted to help. So from there, I decided my next tour was going to be Queen of the Travellers, which was a story about me as a gay traveller growing up in the west of Ireland. And it was a little kind of look at my own life and to expose my own vulnerabilities and to talk about, through comedy obviously, to make sure you laugh, but to talk about the stuff that I would have experienced as a gay traveller growing up in the west of Ireland. Unfortunately, when I did get my tour up and running and I got the venues and I built up my own audience on social media, I didn't do the comedy circuit like every other comedian would have done. Well, like most of them. There's a handful of comedians that are now doing tours that wouldn't have gone the traditional route, and they're doing fantastically well as well. So for me, because I'd built up my audience, and because I now had venues on board, I could now put on an actual scripted show that actually had a story and had substance and had content that people could go away thinking about afterwards. And that's where Queen of the Travellers came in. Unfortunately, the pandemic put that to rest. So this episode is quite a personal thing for me. It's something that I wanted to talk about. And some of the guests that we have on today are going through the exact same situations that we're all going through. So this is an episode about the decimation of the live entertainment and events industry in Ireland. I hope you enjoy it. Our first guest is Paul David Murphy. He is the CEO and brain behind the Tiny Traders Market, which is Tiny Traders Village, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about that. But he's also a stand-up comedian, and like myself, he's been pushed to the wayside. We're not allowed to do the funny things on stage. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Paul.
Glad to be on it, Martin. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. I'm having you on. I'm not having you on.
You're always having me on. You're always having me on.
So, Paul, let's kick straight into it, Paul. You still have. Sorry, I know I'm almost speaking past tense, like it's a forgotten thing that's gone forever, but it's not.
Like talking about anything that was good in our lives. Past tense.
So, I suppose tell the listeners what Tiny Traders Village is, and how that came about. What was your what's your goals with it? Like, what's your ambitions with that, and where are you now with it, and what do you see for it in the future?
So, for anyone who may not have heard of it, Tiny Traders Village, I suppose it's a platform for local startup businesses, authentic and kind of cottage industry locally here in Galway, and the whole concept, I suppose, can be brought anywhere really, but obviously I started here in Galway. So it's designed to give a platform to anybody that makes a product or produces it, such as an artist, a painter, a baker, a lot of food startups as well, beverage startups, all sorts. Basically anybody who's got an idea and needs to showcase it and needs a platform and a marketplace to showcase it. And it does take place, I suppose, primarily as a market, as an actual market event. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on with it and outside of the main event, such as kind of promotion of local businesses and so on and so forth, and some online stuff. But primarily speaking, I suppose it could be described as simply as a market.
And when the Tiny Traders Village was in full swing, and now I've been to it myself, and it's a beautiful atmosphere. You also had some musicians, up and coming musicians as well, and you had foods from all over the world, so it was quite well represented by different cultures and backgrounds.
Yeah, well, I suppose I often described Tiny Traders Village, and it has been described by a few other people as a microcosm of Galway, really. And I did, obviously, there's such a fantastic food scene in Galway, such a fantastic art scene, so many talented people. Anyone that spends 5 or 10 minutes in Galway will see the lovely bohemian atmosphere and vibe the city has. And I came up with it originally because I thought it would just be the perfect event for Galway City and its people. I thought there was so many talented people who could use a place to sell their stuff, so many people with bright ideas, and it's a budding a little entrepreneur's town as well, Galway, and there are so many people who love that stuff and appreciate that stuff as well, and I thought it would be a great thing, a great extra amenity to the city. And the musicians side of it, if you're going to represent Galway in a microcosm or bring any event to Galway, how can you have it without music, without live music? It's such a huge factor in the draw to Galway and the quality of life of those living in Galway. So I always made sure that there was a strong presence of local unsigned artists performing at Tiny Traders as well.
For anyone listening, if you've ever been to Galway City and you walk down Shop Street and you hear the buskers and you get drawn in by their characters, and by all accounts Galway has a long tradition of street performers, having street performers perform. And
totally,
when you walk down Shop Street and you hear the music, and it changes every 20 yards. It changes because there's another busker. But from my memory with the Tiny Traders Village, it was like walking into a condensed shop street. There was music, and then of course you had all the food. And I remember I tried. Was it a Vietnamese food? It was like, I think it was spring rolls.
Spring rolls, yeah.
Oh man, I was like, I ate about 5 of them. They're absolutely delicious and quite well priced as well.
Yeah, well, that was the idea, I suppose. The idea, the way I look at it is, I would like it to be a high quality, low price market, and that's what it was. Obviously, I suppose it means organisers like myself don't have, how would you say, the same profits as maybe organisers of other markets, who maybe prioritise sometimes the kind of cheap and cheerful stuff and maybe even sometimes overpriced stuff. But I certainly did not want that to be the case with Tiny Traders, because the quality of food was so good, and the price really was good. Even better for me, because I got a lot of stuff free, obviously, because I was the organizer, which was my favorite part of the whole thing, you know. And people wanted me to sample stuff and all that, but it was always from day one up until our last market, it was always said, remarked upon about how great the food in there was, and it was so authentic. And not only just, I mean, there was so many good local startups with local kind of food, or with a hipster twist, should I say, maybe. And then there were so many
vegans, right?
Of course.
By the way, for anyone listening, Paul is a vegan and he's quite proud of it. And I think
don't tell anyone.
No, tell everyone. You should be proud of it.
You get beaten up down there for that.
You wouldn't. But don't worry, you're in Galway. Would just
no one will beat me now. But yeah.
But there was some vegan food in this market, wasn't there?
There was a load of vegan food. There actually, to be honest with you, the businesses that did the best, their food businesses that did the best were actually, a lot of them were primarily vegan.
Because people would probably go there for that. They know that they get good vegan food sold by vegans.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I think it was just the way it was quite an interesting thing to watch that, because you're watching, obviously, like I said, I mentioned a microcosm of Galway, but it's actually, I suppose, a microcosm of the marketplace, as in where food is right now, where the food scene is. And I personally saw all of it, and I saw what went well, what didn't go well, what menu changes went well, what kind of foods. And it was always, and you'd be glad to hear, it was always a move towards the more successful, the more healthy, the more wholesome.
Being healthy is successful, Paul.
Of course, yeah. Of course it is.
I say as I'm 3 stone overweight.
Yeah.
I'm a successful eater. I should be competitive.
I suppose, like, the way I would have described it as healthy fast food. You know, that's kind of was the goal. It's what worked very well down there, and it's a good trend to see, you know, and we do see it around the country as well, with a lot of vegan cafes and vegan restaurants and so on and so forth. And everyone knows about these diets now, whereas, you know, myself, when I started being vegan 10 years ago, anytime it was mentioned, I would have to endure a 25-minute FAQ and ensuing debate, you know, about stuff that I really didn't want to debate about. But it was really, really cool. The atmosphere was another thing that you mentioned yourself, and a thing that people mentioned quite a bit that they loved about it. And as a producer of an event and a promoter of an event, that is a thing I'm very happy about, I suppose, because you can do a lot of things, and you know yourself, Martin, in the entertainment industry or anything like that, you can throw loads of money at something and it'll produce a good product, a shiny product, a big one, you know, your glossy sort of big production type stuff. But you can't necessarily buy or spend money towards an atmosphere, you know, and that's what we got. And we were in a number of different venues, and every single venue we were in, people always said they love the atmosphere and the community kind of spirit there, and that's brilliant. And for me, like I said, as a person who put the event together and made it happen, and kind
of course there was a few issues then with maintaining venues as well. There
were, unfortunately, yeah. Well, it was we had some difficult patches, alright, you know.
But that's part and parcel. Would be like when you're a new enterprise and you want to kind of carve out your own kind of space. And by all accounts, it almost comes across like you were doing it on behalf of the whole market, not just yourself.
Of course, yeah. Well, Like I said earlier on, the profits of my own as an organizer would not be the same as the profits of other people, because I made it almost a social enterprise. The market came first, the traders came first, people working for me came first. But sometimes we were in positions where venues couldn't support that, and made it financially impossible, I suppose, to continue.
It's like the crossover from like a social enterprise into the big corporate enterprise world. Even though like these buildings were actually community-based buildings.
Yes, and government-funded ones as well. So it was quite disappointing, to say the least. Yeah.
But I suppose then, what's it like now? Now that you can't run a market, have you been talking to the stall owners? Have you been talking to everyone else?
Yeah, we'd all be quite close, actually. I'd be very close with them all, and almost all of them. Yeah, and I'd say very close now. Some of them I haven't actually seen since our last market, but we'd be a close knit group, and everyone gets on with everyone. That's the way I like it. There's no competition in a negative sense. There's good examples, and there's someone does something with their stall and go, oh, actually that's great, I might try that with my one, and that's a good thing. Everyone helps each other out, and we have a great community there. At this very moment in time, obviously we're not in the greatest era of events and entertainment in history, so I was supposed to come back. We were supposed to come back to Tiny Traders Village this Christmas. I wouldn't rule 100% out yet that we're not going to.
But also the Christmas market in Ayr Square, that's gone as well, isn't it?
That's gone as well. Another.
That was it. You were working at that.
I work at that. One of the managers there. Yeah, for the last good few years. Another very good market. Yes, it was. I was quite disappointed to read that the council just decided against letting the organisers use Ayr Square, kind of just blanket. No, I suppose I felt that the company that used it, or said that runs the market, used the space and run the market, they have years of proving themselves in the industry, of course, in that very spot with that very event, the Christmas market. But this summer in particular, they ran the Galway Summer Garden, which was a huge success. And I mean, to run any event in the absolute height of restrictions, and it to be completely compliant, successful and popular, was deserving of nothing, only credit, So I just felt that they could have been given another opportunity to maybe present a plan B or C or D. And I know the people obviously well, and that run it, and I know they would have had an alternative plan in place. But anyway, I suppose the council decided against it, and that's the way it is now.
So you're also a stand-up comedian, which is another. I suppose the events industry has been decimated also, and you would have lost out on quite a few gigs this year as well.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Had my best ever January and best ever February for work, gigs and everything else. Now, I hadn't my own personal stuff, like Tiny Traders Village was due to come back in March, and my other stuff, like I had 2 festivals planned. I just didn't get a chance at all. They were supposed to be, I think it was May for one of them and September for another one. I had an approximation of in my head anyway. But yes, the gigs it's actually the thing I miss most. I miss everything to do with events, and certainly running my own things. And I miss Tiny Traders Village hugely, but I have to say the gigs, the touring, the comedy and everything like that was certainly the thing I missed the most.
Yeah, it's affected us all, man. Like, I'll be honest with you.
Indeed.
We're like, but then again, I wouldn't have set up this podcast, myself and Chris. We wouldn't have done this had we not been forced into a situation where we can't perform.
Yeah,
and and now with so like what date is today? It's like August or October 19th. So Monday, October 19th, this has been recorded, and we're hearing now that we could be going into level 5 for 6 weeks, which means I won't even be able to go to anyone's house or go drive anywhere to record anything. So it's like we're getting it on all angles. But then again, what can we do? We have to toe the line like everyone else.
Yeah. We have to innovate. We have to, I suppose, just deal with it in many cases. I mean, as I'm sure it's often said about me, I have fingers in a lot of pies. It's just, but all of the pies were removed, and the oven as well to make them in. So just have to. I think a bit like yourself, I'm focusing on kind of different projects and side projects that I kind of intended to do, let's be fair, that I intended to do, and some things that I didn't intend to do, and I'm innovating. And even going back to Tiny Traders Village, I have a new idea. I'm just formulating. It's pretty much formulated in my head. I'm putting the finishing touches on it, and I'll be presenting it soon on our page. So for anyone that's interested in that, you can check out our Facebook page, Tiny Traders Village, and it's Tiny Traders Village on Instagram as well. Especially if you're an artist or a cultural producer of any kind, i.e. classes or and anything at all, a crafter. So it's designed to benefit you guys and to keep you guys doing what you do best.
So you told me before the interview started, and we'll finish up I think with this as well. So you told me before this started anyway, that before we start recording, that your new idea is going to help artists and craft makers get their work sold, and also in a way to support the arts industry, or I suppose the artists. They're still under the arts industry, but to support it in a way that you can still help them to sell their work. And I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea, and it's quite indicative of the times. You know what they say, in the midst of like economic turmoil, like if you look at any of the recessions we've had, we always churn out the best music, or we always churn out, the innovative ideas. Unfortunately, this year, because it's a pandemic, it's not just a recession, it's a pandemic. We can't even get into recording studios, you can't make the movies, you can't do all that. But I would envision that next year is going to be full of lots of stories. And I also think that next year we'll both bounce back in comedy. You'll be back with Tiny Traders, and we'll just pick up where we left off.
Indeed, yeah. And like I said, I'm getting to do a lot of writing, which in fairness I had been neglecting hugely because it's working all the time. And I suppose, like, without sounding like Rupert Murdoch now, business comes first. It has to, you have to pay bills. And thankfully the touring for comedy was contributing nicely towards that as well. And I was enjoying the gigs. I suppose I had it very good, very good quality of life. So maybe a bit of misery will get better stuff out of me now. And
you already know miserable bollocks anyway.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I had to leave Mayo. It was too miserable down there, so I'm bringing my misery from Mayo up to
Han Mayo. I love Mayo.
Oh yeah, we good victory over you yesterday. Now, absolutely hockey G altogether. But anyway,
on that note,
but as well, just for anyone as well, I'll be coming up with a lot of stuff on new sketches, new ideas, new different things on my Facebook page, which is my Facebook comedy page. It's called The Wet Week, and it's kind of taking the guise of satirical news story type page and videos, current affair type stuff at the moment. So that's why it's called The Wet Week, because we're in for a lot of wet weeks at the moment, and we have one now.
Absolutely. This week. Well, look, Paul, thank you very much for joining us today, and thanks a million for kind of, I suppose, giving us an in-depth kind of look at what it's like to lose both comedy and your market momentarily. Let's hold hopes.
Yeah, and you never know. It may be back for Christmas. I wouldn't hold my breath. Let's hope this new idea is innovative enough. People get on board, and let's just see. So, like I said to the listeners, stay tuned and look at the pages and stuff, and sure we'll see.
And those pages again are Tiny Traders Village,
and The Wet Week.
The Wet Week. Well, Paul, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thanks very much for having me. Now, my pleasure.
But it's time for a cup of tea on the Has Been Show. This show has been sponsored by The Furniture Emporium. The Furniture Emporium is located in Oranmore, County Galway. Go check them out on Facebook, Twitter, and on their website. They do a lot of online sales also. Make sure you check out their Instagram for all the cool pictures they have of all the cool and funky furniture. Check out The Furniture Emporium, Oranmore, County Galway. Coming up next, we have Naoise Nunn. I met Naoise last year at Electric Picnic, where he was running Mindfield, a fantastic part of the Electric Picnic festival. And he's going to speak to us today about the effects of the pandemic on the entertainment industry, and more specifically the events and festival industry. Hello, Naoise. So welcome to the Has Beens podcast anyway, for me, Martin Beanz Warde, who you met last year. I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to come on and have a discussion. It's not the best of times.
Yeah, delighted. It's absolutely lashing down outside, and we're just about to be told that we're going into level 5. But sure, we have our health,
and we're all in it together.
We're all in it together. Yeah.
Look. I suppose the first thing I want to kind of, bring to the listeners of this is who you are and what you do. So you're an events promoter. Can you tell us a little bit about the type of events you do, or
Yeah, I suppose I describe myself as as an events producer, events promoter. Yeah, I mean, so I have a company with my wife Maria. It's called Naoise Nunn, and we do the Bram Stoker Festival. We're involved in Kilkenomics, which I've been involved with for a long time in Kilkenny. I used to work on the Cat Laughs Comedy Festival in Kilkenny. We have done work on Body and Soul in the past, doing Library of Progress, and Maria works on the comedy tent at Body and Soul. Not anymore, but did. And we've also done other bits and pieces, but I suppose the big one is, and where I met you and where I know you from is from Mindfield, which is kind of the spoken word and debate section of Electric Picnic. It's kind of like a festival inside a festival, really, with a whole range of spoken word stuff, from poetry to political economic debate and podcasts and literary chats and all of that kind of thing.
Well, just on that, and for the listeners that are listening, last year was the first time that I ever performed or did anything at Electric Picnic, and it has to be said, you were the first promoter to give an opportunity to not only one traveller, you actually went for the gender balance as well. You didn't just get one traveller as a token.
Yeah.
You said, no, fuck that, I want to get gender balance as well. And you chose myself and Dr. Cindy Joyce. And we took part in a discussion that was brilliantly chaired by Jennifer O'Connell, who, another journalist, by the way, who's always been very straight-lined and has written about travellers in the past in a very kind of positive way. So she's a lovely person, but overall the whole experience, and myself and Cindy were saying this as we were knocking back a couple of cheap gins backstage, we were saying, like, it was such a massive thing for us to not only be there but to be part of the whole thing. And I like that kind of thing. It can't go unmentioned, because I know a lot of people take it for granted, but for us it was a massive first step and massive leap for travellers working in the arts. So I just want to say, first off, thank you for that, and second off, next time you do it, can you make sure that there's 3 microphones, because myself and Cindy were fighting to get a word in.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to Martin, and like, you know, it only surprises me that wasn't the case. I think I may have had Rosalie McDonough on one of the stages maybe a few years previously, but you know, it's a surprise, and it's,
I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, and it's not a great reflection, really, in fairness, you know, that's the impression, you know, that you have, is that, and that's your lived experience, is that's the first time, you know, travellers have been invited to be on stages at Electric Picnic. Certainly should not be the case. You know, Electric Picnic is, you know, it's of all of Ireland, you know, and I mean, most all festivals should be, you know, and you're celebrating the breadth of culture and diversity in the country. It should do, you know, and it shouldn't have to be you acknowledging and thanking anybody, you know. It should just be, you know, it should be ordinary, you know, and let's kind of work towards a point where that is the case, you know.
Well, to be fair, I like, myself and Cindy are of that school that, you know, unfortunately we are in a position where we do rely on the goodness and kindness of promoters and producers and people who set up these events and things like that. So it's of no consequence for us to turn around and say afterwards, thank you for that, because I think it's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning that, you know. So look, thank you, and that's it. The check is in the post, okay?
But I'll tell you, interesting, and it's a complete sidebar, but I grew up knowing travellers and knowing traveller families. I grew up in south of County Kilkenny, and my father was actually a furniture maker. He died 5 years ago, but he was a furniture maker and designer. But before he did that, he was a furniture dealer. So he spent a lot of the 70s and the early 80s travelling around the country to traveller camps and to traveller homes, buying furniture off them, because what they'd done after after Ireland joined the EEC in 1972, one of the biggest kind of chunks of money that came into the country was cap money, you know, for the Common Agricultural Policy. So all of a sudden, in the early 1970s, farmers all over the country were flush with money, and the first thing they wanted to do is get rid of the old furniture and get new suites in.
Right.
And the travellers found this fantastic gap in the market where they could both provide the new suites, but also take out the old furniture and find a market for the old furniture, where it became, strip pine, which was exported out of the country, out to France and Spain and Germany and the States and so on. It was, high fashion furniture wise, at the end of the 70s and 80s. My father actually set up an organisation called the Irish Country Furniture Society, if you could believe such a thing would exist. And he kept some of the best stuff that came out, which came, from farmhouses through the hands of travellers into my father's yard, and then off out on Harry Crosby's trucks out around the continent. He kept some of the best stuff, and some of the best stuff is down in Johnstown Castle in Wexford, in the museum of, I think it's the Museum of Country Life or the Irish Agricultural Museum or something like that, but there's a collection of furniture down there which is kind of the best of Irish vernacular furniture as it happened, but most of that came through the hands of travellers into my father's yard and then back out again, So that's where I grew up. So I knew traveller families around the country growing up, and I've always I've always had that affinity for the people,
Well, I'll tell you what, like this is the first time I'm hearing this, so first off, thanks for sharing that. That's actually a really cool story, and it's more of those stories we need to hear. But just on that, did maybe your father was expecting you to, I suppose, keep this furniture business going? Is that why he named you Naoise? Naoise, of course, meaning soldier or Gaelic, isn't it? Or warrior, is it?
No, I don't think there's an English translation as such. It's from Naoise and Deirdre of the Sorrows, and Naoise was one of the sons of Uisneach and all of that kind of thing. So it was Naoise and Deirdre and all of that kind of thing. But no, my father was my stepfather, and he's English. So the travellers regarded him as a very strange man indeed. He was not only a countryman but an English countryman.
He was a countryman with an accent.
Exactly, yeah. So no, he didn't. He wasn't surprised when I didn't stay in the game, and he was happy enough to see me getting into the arts and entertainment industry or business.
By all accounts, you excelled. But I suppose then, from the producer and the promoter side of it, then how was the pandemic? Like, I know we've all heard, it's bad and all that, but how bad is it? What are we looking at the moment?
It's complete devastation. Obviously, all theatres are closed apart from a couple that managed to stay open for a tiny number of people, and fair play to them for doing that. But commercial venues in particular, where there's no state funding, have nothing. We're facing into another 6 weeks of everything just being hard locked down. So there's absolutely no income from your trade or from your art at all, and for many people there hasn't been since March. It's 7 months, and looking into another 3 months. It could be a year before a lot of people make any money at all from their trade and from their art, and that's a really dispiriting, demoralizing position to be in. And obviously then promoters and producers and people who run festivals like us, we can't operate either, but we're managing to keep going. There's a bit of Arts Council money to do some work here. There's some Creative Ireland money to do some work here. Bit of consultancy, that kind of thing. And then the festivals that we are working on, I just did Kilkenny Animated with Cartoon Saloon, which is a festival of animation. We were able to do a lot of stuff outside, and we did projections and all of that kind of thing, supported by Fáilte Ireland. But none of it would have been possible without state subvention. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So if you're in the pure commercial production end of things, it's an absolute wipeout, and I'm sure Pearse will tell you about this himself. The number of people who are employed directly, from riggers and stagehands and production managers and lighting and transport and sound engineers and all the rest. It's a vast ecosystem, that works in the commercial arts as opposed to the funded arts, which is, the Arts Council. Obviously, people will know there's huge extra money available, like, you know, unprecedented extra money available for the funded arts, you know, but the commercial arts, which is not normally funded by the Arts Council, like, you know, stand-up comedy, which you're in yourself, exactly. Or, you know, the music business and all that kind of thing. You know, it's really, really tough, and I think that's where that's where people are suffering the most. You know.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, that whole argument for stand-up comedians, that's been going on for a long time. You know, asking to come under that umbrella. Well, I tell you what, now I'm giving up stand-up comedy. I am now doing what is called theatrical comedy. Because
excellent. I'll book you now.
We get extra funding for it, apparently, and apparently it's an actual job if you put in the word artistic or something like that, or theatrical. But like, to be honest with you, like, for myself, this year was meant to be my first proper tour. Last year I did a tour called the Go Me Fiend, which was totally ad-libbed and improvised, 2 hours of comedy or just interaction with the crowd, which was great, but I used it as a dry run to get venues, and I wasn't able to get a lot of venues, to be honest with you. And you mentioned Kilkenny. That's actually one of the places that none of the major venues have even responded to me.
Right.
So what I did then at the end of the Go Me Fiend tour, I put a call out to the arts community, because I went in with the notion, who are these lawdy-daws, you know, these upper class people, and they're not going to be doing anything for travellers. Well, within 2 days of me putting up that video, the vast majority of people that were in power or had access to venues got in touch with me. And I learned from like after that I was totally wrong. I went in with the wrong notion entirely, with this victim mentality, when in actual fact most of the people in the arts community just didn't know about me. So when I put the call out, I got this huge amount of support. So this year was meant to be my first proper tour, you know, a scripted tour. It was called Queen of the Travellers, a little story about a gay traveller growing up in the west of Ireland, and then all of a sudden this pandemic comes along and it wipes it all out, and I had sold out shows lost because of that.
I know, it really is devastating, all the work that people put in. You know, I mean, I suppose the thing is that, you know, there are some supports there from the government in terms of the pub. It's something. It's not enough, but it's something. And I think we have to have hope that, you know, I mean, I've done some events where I've talked to Professor Luke O'Neill, who's the epidemiologist and immunologist in Trinity, who's been on the airwaves a lot, and he's full of hope. I mean, he you know, he's pretty convinced that there would be a vaccine being generally available and generally used in Ireland by the third quarter of next year. So, you know, from the summer onwards. Now, that doesn't mean obviously that, you know, immediately big festivals are back and so on, but it does mean that we can kind of start, you know, numbers in venues can increase and it becomes more commercially viable. And then in the meantime, you know, there's the extra money that the Arts Council has, and then there's the commercial entertainment fund of 50 million, which was announced in the budget as well.
That's right,
and that will be available to promoters, comedy promoters as well, to put on gigs and to subsidise gigs and make them happen where it wouldn't otherwise be commercially viable, you know. So you know, you can do, you know, if you're in a venue that would normally take 100 people, social distancing means you can only take, you know, 20 people, but that's not commercially viable. But with this grant, then it means you can do stand-up gigs for 10 people, and, you know, the promoter and the comedian can still get paid a reasonable rate. Do you know what I mean? And the audience gets to pay a reasonable ticket price. But that's really the only way. In the interim between now and when a vaccine is generally available, we're kind of dependent on, you know, massive government state subsidy to work at all, you know. So there are lots of, I mean, I'm hopeful. There are lots of initiatives and lots of you know, opportunities out there, given how much money was made available in the budget in the arts to do stuff. You know, you've just got to be creative and collaborate with people as well. You know, it's always a good idea to collaborate across art forms and also across, you know, with other people that you get on with, you know, that you have a singular idea. You know, it's, you know, whether it's music and comedy or theatre and architecture, or, you know, dancing about architecture or whatever, you know.
I think this is an area that I need to start delving into more myself, and I think you've hit on everything perfectly there, because it is a time that we have to adapt to survive. But I think what's lost in a lot of this, people listening now will be saying, oh, well, like, you promoters, oh, sure, you do well anyway, sure, like why should we feel sorry for you? What they don't understand is that right through this, you'll still have to be almost preparing for next year's festivals and all of your events next year as if they were happening, just in case, 6 months down the line, all the restrictions do end and you can go full steam ahead. So you're still working right through all of this.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're planning all the time for stuff, and you're looking ahead and wondering, speculating a lot of time, which is kind of, it's kind of exhausting in some ways, because you're using up massive amounts of mental energy to kind of predict, will Electric Picnic happen next year? In which case, what do we need to have in place, and what are the financial implications if it doesn't happen? And I kind of describe it. It's like, running events and planning events in this kind of environment. It's kind of four times the effort for one quarter the output.
Yeah. That's the sad reality of it all. But look, as I said earlier, we're all in this together, and I think by the end of it, I tell you what, there's going to be some feckin' party next year if the festival.
As the badges doing the round, go Tucky our sesh.
Well, listen, Naoise Nunn, thank you so much. So you're on Twitter, Naoise Nunn, but is there something else that we should follow? Is there another page?
No, Twitter is the thing. Naoise, Naoisen.
Naoise Nunn. Well, listen, Naoise, again, thanks a million for last year, and if I see you next year, we'll have an old pint or something like that from about 10 metres away. Nothing to do with the pandemic or anything, just to keep away from me. But listen, you've been an absolute pleasure to have on, and thank you so much, because everything you said was quite informative. And again, look, let's look to the future with a bit of hope.
Great stuff. Thanks, Martin.
Cheers, Naoise. So up next we have Pearse Doherty, who's also an events producer. Pearse, welcome to the Has Been Show. How are you keeping?
Great, thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here.
Oh, an honour. Look at you silver-tongued fox. Yeah.
Shan, I'm a wide buff. You wide yourself.
Oh, I'm wide as gates for you buffers. Don't you worry about that. Well, Pearse, I just spoke to Naoise Nunn there a while ago, who you probably know, actually. So he's a great producer and events promoter. And he was telling me, with given from his perspective, like how bad it's gotten, and also he did give a bit of a glimmer of hope as well for the future. I suppose for yourself, because you're doing a lot of work at the minute with a lot of promoters and a lot of people working in the live entertainment sector. What's it like on the ground? I know it's really bad, but how bad is it?
Well, I was elected onto a working group called Event Production Industry Covid19, which is EPIC, and it's the first time that the industry has ever had a lobby group. It grew out of an email thread that started a while back over a friend who actually passed away, and people couldn't make the funeral because everybody was so busy, so they had a get together, and then the COVID arrived, and out of that grew this group. And the purpose of the group was to really lobby for the people who've never had a voice in the business before. That's the non-funded SMEs, the professional events organisers, and events workers, techies like sound people, lighting, all that. So we've been actively lobbying the government for the last 24 weeks, and we've been getting some good positive feedback. We've some done and a lot more to do, as they say.
Of course, but the job is never done, Pearse.
No.
But even though when you mentioned like that, the people who wouldn't have been included with the arts under the arts funding in the past. So this is the first time this lobby group has come forward. Do you know what? It'd be no harm if the arts community started to also include stand-up comedians under their umbrella. Because we are another type of group of people that perform that aren't included in what they do, type of thing. So with this group called Epic.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry. What were you going to say?
Just before you move off that about the comedians, I remember I used to work with Tommy a lot around the country, and I remember him explaining to him what a PRS check was for a songwriter. How a songwriter would write a song, and then the song gets played on radio, or every time the song gets played live, the songwriter would generate money out of this. Whereas like a comedian writes his own material, rehearses it, and performs it, books the gigs probably themselves, and there's never any recognition of that creative side that comedy does. So, I mean, just like from a comedian's perspective, I totally understand the frustration of not actually being recognised for the work that's created in comedy, you know. But regarding the work that has to be done, I mean, the budget was very... the budget didn't address the PUP shortcomings, although there was a 50 million fund, and I'm saying that in inverted commas, allocated to the Department of Arts, Culture and Engagement, which yet has to be decided on how it's going to be broken down. But hopefully that will engage promoters and it'll engage venues to get back up and running in some form that can work within the level 1 to level 5 restrictions, like hopefully level 1, level 2, and maybe level 3, you know. There's also work to be done for the SMEs who didn't qualify for that CRSS funding. So that's for people that really who could public-facing venues, like shops that would do say a pub, restaurant, which anything like that is closed down because of a restriction. Then they get recompensated. But like the PA companies or the lighting companies that don't get anything, even though the venues depend on them then to go on the shows. So there's a lot of work out to be done, but at the same time, it is going in the right direction. If that makes sense.
I can see. Like to be fair, the government have responded in some way to alleviate, I suppose, a lot of the concerns. But then there's other things like, you know, they're saying that you're allowed to earn, is it €480 a month or something like that?
That's right, yeah, on top of your PUP. Which still, like, put that with the PUP, still wouldn't replace the income loss. But look, it's something, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And you can't sniff at it. But I think one of the suggestions that Epic made then was that to allow people to earn more and just tax it at the end of the year as you normally would. Yeah.
But you see, again, and that would be perfect because then people will be back earning and companies will be back trading, venues will be back working and the whole system's back up and running. But there is no chance for that to happen until like we actually find some sort of an antidote or something to the bloody virus that's going to be able to allow us to actually, I don't know if we're ever going to get back to full big halls again, but get back to a percentage that makes sense to make it work, you know.
Well, yeah, I suppose, and that's all we can do is kind of work at what we have at the moment. But unfortunately, what we have, and look, we're looking at another 6 weeks of level 5 apparently. Like that's crazy.
Well, it's crazy, but I mean, it's if you take a step back and look at what they're trying to do here, it's a system they're trying to introduce, and the idea of a road to recovery is kind of gone now. It's kind of like learning how to live with the bloody thing. So, it's amazing just for my own head going into that world of people lobbying government and that and, questioning people. I mean, Epic have never questioned the method decision simply because we fully believe they've got the best interest at heart.
Of course, yes.
And whatever the decisions and guidelines are, then we learn how to work within them. And that's the challenge that we have as promoters, venue owners, even performers, is to learn how to perform in this new world, whether it's online, or whether it's just smaller crowds. And, like somebody was saying there, you go online, you do your set. So, I mean, the whole wide world gets to see it. So the next time you go online, do you have to have a brand new set? So it's, it's a very difficult one.
Well, you would have to have a brand new set because once it goes up online, it's there forever. And the only...
If you're Jerry Mallon, you do the same set for the rest of your life.
I tell you what, all respect to Jerry Mallon, but Jerry Mallon's used to performing in front of 5 or 6 people in an empty room.
Stop. He's killing us for sagging him anyway.
It's only a bit of crack. It's a bit of crack. For anyone listening, Jerry Mallon's a friend of ours, so I'm sure he'll take the ribbing in the right way.
He's actually retired now officially anyway.
Oh, has he retired?
Yes, officially, yeah. I think he's not going to do it anymore. Yeah.
Didn't hear that now.
He's still a hard-working man.
He's the hardest working man I've ever seen in my life. But Pearse, I suppose one of the things then, so going forward, so I've looked at I suppose the statement from Epic, and it does cover like the PUP and like the payments and things like that. And I think what you said there, like allowing people to earn more than the 480 and taxing it at the end of the year, it is a good way to kind of stimulate, I suppose that part of the industry that is decimated and is at a standstill at the moment. But outside of that, are there any suggestions that I suppose this, because Epic is more or less an alliance. It's like a co-op of all those workers. So are there any suggestions that you guys have made that aren't being taken up and that should be looked at a little bit more seriously?
Not. I mean, like there are things inherent in the industry that need to be fixed anyway, regardless of COVID. And it's not to get them confused with reacting to the COVID, you know.
Yeah.
But immediately, I have to say that the take up, like I'm on this task force. I was elected onto the task force to represent the Event Industry Alliance. I have to say it's full of very positive people looking forward, and we're publishing our recommendations to the minister on the 31st of October. So it's after that we'll see how much of a take-up there is. But, you know, they're very, very solid suggestions as a reaction to COVID. Right now, I can't... Is there any that I can't have? I could tell you the truth, Martin, I'm in the woods here walking with the dogs. I totally forgot. I've been trying to cover it up, but like the dogs keep growling at me every now and again. So I have nothing in front of me, but you know.
Well, sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, they responded to the task force, you know, which is great. Our biggest thing at the moment, which we're trying to get dealt with, is the fact that all our SMEs didn't qualify for the CRSS funding that Pascal Donoghue said was there for companies that were closed because of COVID. So that's what we're addressing at the moment as a lobby group. And, you know, it's going to take time. These things take time for people to digest what we're saying and then react to it. But I think all budgets are like that, so I'm told, you know. I mean, it was amazing the day the budget was released. It was like my first time ever cluing into anything like in my life. It was a new direction for me at such a late stage. But yeah,
I'll tell you what. Like, where can we direct people? So for anyone that's listening to this now, where can we direct them to learn more?
If you're a performer, musician, comedian, anything like that, there's a great organisation called MEAI, and they have a Facebook page. It's run by Jackie Conroy and Matt, and they have been doing amazing work for individuals. And if you're a company, go onto the Epic website, epicwg.com, and do our census and fill out your details there. I mean, both those groups are working hand in hand for the professional individuals and for the companies. And hopefully, you know, at the end of this, we can sit back and say we did some good work on it. Both organisations have never been represented before, so it's, you know, it's new ground for all of us. But that's where they go. Yeah, MEAI on Facebook, epicwg.com online. You know.
Well, I suppose on behalf of everyone that is in the industry, I want to say thank you, Pearse, first off, and for all the whole team of people that's involved with you. And like, look, we are genuinely going through this massive change in our lives, and we are going through it together. Some of us are coming out the other side. Will come out the other side less, I suppose, affected, and others will come out absolutely devastated. But look, the point is, we have people there lobbying and fighting for change and fighting to keep our interests safe. So, well done, Sham.
No problem. Sham was great. Now getting a little bit of praise from yourself. Like,
I know that. Don't get used to it. Packets, Sham, you're wide.
I am. Look, listen, best of luck with the podcast. Great idea, and fair play to you. And hopefully, maybe in a couple of weeks, I might be able to come back to you and give you some great news. You never know.
Do you know what? There will be a follow-up episode actually about this, about I suppose the resurgence of the arts, and because there's a few announcements that have yet to be made that we can't mention at the moment, but we will definitely be doing a follow-up episode, so we'd love to have you back on. And hopefully, if the restrictions aren't there, I'll be able to invite you into the camper van for a cup of tea and do it the proper way.
Mighty stuff. Brilliant.
Pearse Doherty, thank you so much for joining us on the Has Been Show.
Bye, Martin.
All right, buddy. Mind yourself. Bye-bye. You've been listening to the Has Been Show. Today's episode, we looked at the live entertainment industry, and we talked to Naoise Nunn, Pearse Doherty, and Paul Levin Murphy. 3 people from 3 different areas working towards the exact same goal, which is to get back on track and to overcome all the adversity that we have to face during this pandemic. The signs are looking like, you know, there is a future ahead. What it's going to look like, nobody knows at this stage. And, you know, I think that this topic alone deserves a follow-up episode. And I think we're going to come back to all of these guys in a few months' time to see exactly where we're at. If anything, just to look at maybe what's changed. And there's a few things, as Pearse mentioned in the interview. October 31st there's going to be recommendations sent, so we will wait until then to look at exactly how the government respond to those recommendations. But as it stands, I would encourage you all to be mindful of people that work in the arts and entertainment industry. Give us a follow, give us a share, help promote our work. If we're doing online shows, do buy a ticket. Just help. We're all in this little boat together, and this pandemic is rocking it. So let's keep shoveling up and pushing out the old sand so we can kind of get a bit of a dike. Not like Virgil van Dijk, who was unfortunately brutally assaulted by Jordan Pickford in the Everton versus Liverpool match, and that shall not be forgotten. You'll never walk alone. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode of The Has Been Show. The Has Been Show is available on all platforms. Do check us out on Facebook, which is The Has Been Show, or on Twitter, @hasbeens the. If you can, we would really, really appreciate if you could subscribe to our Patreon page, which is www.patreon.com/The Has Beens Show. The Has Beens is spelled THEHAZBEANZSHOW. Thank you so much. The Has Beens podcast is presented by me, Martin Beanz Warde. On sound and sound engineering is Chris Sture. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. It's Beans in a pod, but this pod is travelling.